Welcome to this episode of Writer's Chat, where we gather together and talk everything writerly. And today, Melissa and Brandy and I are so excited to welcome our guest, Becky Antkowiak. And to tell you more about Becky and her topic for today, I'm going to hand it off to Brandy.
Hello. Becky Antkowiak is a writer, speaker, editor, compassionate international advocate, enthusiastic grammar floozy, and is the chief encouragement officer of the 540 writers community. A lifelong serial extrovert, Becky believes strangers are friends she hasn't met. Fair warning, make eye contact only if you want a friend for life. Becky, we're so glad to have you with us, and she's going to talk to us today about marketing for gummies. What does that mean, Becky? Take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. So you've heard of the Dummies series, so it was just sort of a play on that. For those of you who are like, why are we calling it this? So instead of marketing for dummies, this is marketing for gummies.
Clever.
And let me share my screen and we'll get rolling. All right. So welcome to Marketing for Gummies, a sweet guide to creative branding. Again, thank you so much for having me. I love coming here. So my mother likes to teach small children large words, which is where my future as the Grammar Floozy, lover of words, began. So more or less, as soon as I could talk, she taught me to say esophagus. And so that was a big hit when I had a sore throat and had to go to the doctor, and they'd say, "Where does it hurt?" "My esophagus." And I was like barely speaking. So this has been, 40 years ago, right? More than that, really, but we won't talk about how much more than 40. Anyway, so now she's still doing it, and she taught my tiny niece ubiquitous. So this child is like barely 2 and she's walking around, "I'm ubiquitous." And so it's sort of a chicken and egg conversation, because I'm not sure if my mom picked that word because no matter where we were, the child was also, or whether my niece took it as her personal mission to become the definition of ubiquitous. But that little ball of energy requires the supervision of 6 adults. She is everywhere. And our goal in branding is to be ubiquitous. So the map that you see shows the current locations for a candy company begun in Bonn, Germany. And sorry, I'm trying to make it move. Here we go. Okay. Maybe. There we go. Okay. So when I show you this picture of fire, you recognize it because we encounter fire everywhere. And that is the definition of ubiquitous. Ubiquity matters. In order to sell a product or spread a message, people first need to know about the product or the message. The product or message needs to be ubiquitous. You have to encounter it everywhere, and it needs to be widely recognized. So for a product or message to be ubiquitous, something has to happen first, which is marketing. If you want to make creatives quiver in their shoes, just whisper, "It's time to..." So marketing can be overwhelming, and comparing ourselves to others who appear to be more successful can lead to discouragement. So, and then, if you look at all the marketing to-do lists, that can leave us feeling like we're treading water. So instead of making another marketing list, we're going to walk through the fascinating story of Hans Riegel. You know who that is, right? Yeah? No? Okay. I'm going to guess no, but since I can't see your faces, if you know who he is, or if you don't, put yes or no in the chat, just so I'm just curious if anyone knew who he was ahead of time. All right, so you may not recognize Hans Riegel, but I guarantee you will recognize his invention. So in 1922, Hans Riegel created the recipe for gummy bears. 100 years later, gummy bears are ubiquitous. They are in grocery stores and candy stores around the world. I found a 5-pound gummy bear in a shop in Florida. 5 pounds, the size of a small baby. They're on clothing, they're on luggage, on accessories. You can get almost anything plastered in gummy bears. They have their own television show. They have their own theme song. And a German Eurodance virtual musician has put out an entire album about gummies. How did this happen? All right, so let's run through a quick gummy history. In 1920, gummy bears did not exist. Hans Riegel had experience working as a confectioner and decided to strike out on his own. Like many of us, he worked from home. He produced hard candy with a brick oven and a copper kettle, and he named his company Haribo, which was a combination of the first 2 letters of his first and last name and the last 2 letters of his hometown of Bonn, Germany. Haribo. His wife was the sole employee and delivery person. I imagine this poor woman's life. She rode a bicycle to make deliveries. I cannot imagine. So the hard candy did not sell as he planned. And in 1922, he came up with a gelatin-based formula and made fruit-flavored candy in the shape of dancing bears, which were popular entertainment in European festivals at that time. So technically, he didn't invent the idea of soft candy. Turkish delight and Japanese rice candy already existed, but his gelatin formula was unique. Other popular chewy candies were usually starch or pectin-based and didn't have the texture of the gelatin-based gummies, and they didn't come in fun bear shapes. And I know you're probably like, why do we need the history of gummies? But this is kind of important. So as World War II began, Hans Riegel's company employed 400 and produced 10 tons of candy each day. Can you imagine? The future of gummies appeared bright. But in 1945, Hans passed away, and his sons, Hans Jr. and Paul, were taken as prisoners of war. So Gertrude, his wife, worked hard to keep the company going, but by the time her sons were released, the company only employed about 30 people. Hans Jr. and Paul rebuilt the company. Within 5 years, Haribo employed 1,000 workers. Paul oversaw production, and Hans Jr. handled the marketing and sales. And Hans came up with the tagline, originally, "Kids love it so, the happy world of Haribo." Eventually, they added "and adults" to show gummies appeal to all ages. And you will find that true if you ever look in my cabinets in my kitchen. Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm having trouble skipping from slide to slide. Don't know why. Come back, little arrow. See if I can touch it. There we go. Okay. All right. In 1975, the company renamed the bears from Gummy Barchen, which, that's easy to say, little gummy bears, to Goldbarren, which is a punny play on the German words cute gold, since the word sounded like bear. And the name Gold Bears was born. In 1978, they redesigned the bears to the shape we know today, which is more stylized and less like a European dancing bear to appeal to a wider audience no longer familiar with dancing bears. Gummy bears came to America as German language teachers in the US gave students gummy bears so they could try foreign candy, and American servicemen brought gummy bears home as souvenirs. In the early 80s, other companies started noticing the popular gummy bear flavor and texture and began creating gummy candies themselves. Haribo opened its first office in America. Gummy bear popularity in the US exploded. Gummy bears had their own television show beginning in 1985, and the Gummy Bear song dropped in 2007. It had 2.9 billion views. Like, that's crazy. And we're not talking about the gummy bears bouncing here and there and everywhere. Some of you will know that one, and now it's in your head. You're welcome. But this is something completely different. I hadn't even heard it until I started researching. It's kind of weird, actually. But they have a whole album now. While they branched out into items other than bears, Haribo's texture and their secret formula for bold fruit flavors keeps them unique, which is another word we need to know. Haribo remains one of the leading gummy manufacturers in the world. And in 2020, 100 years after Hans created the company, Haribo broke ground in that US plant. As of 2020, the company manufactured gummies in 16 production sites in 10 countries, employed 7,000, and produced 100 million gold bears per day. So the current annual production of Haribo gold bears lined up, the gold bears would wrap around the earth 10 times. In 2021, Forbes listed Haribo in the top 25 of the best small and medium workplaces in manufacturing and production. And this is specifically because employees feel empowered to come up with new ideas. So they are continuing Hans's innovative thought process. All right. So, the history is fascinating, but you might be wondering why we're talking about candy. But these chewy little fruity bits of sugar provide great marketing wisdom. So now that we have an overview, let's talk about how this all happened. All right. So this is how we can apply Hans Riegel's principles to our writing with what I call the gummy marketing alphabet: active perseverance, branding, commitment, discovery, and extraordinary you. Active perseverance over time results in growth. So for the first several years, Hans and his wife were the only employees. Many of us work from home or work by ourselves on our writing, and it might feel a little bit solitary. We talked about how by year 20, he was employing 400 people. That would be great if we could, create a publishing company that had 400 employees. And sometimes that happens. But often something catastrophic happens. And for Hans, it was World War II. So the company dropped over 90% of its employees, and they could have given up. Gummies might have faded from candy history. So instead, they worked hard, and over the next 5 years, their employee count exploded from 30 to 1,000. By 2022, the company employed 7,000. So the amount of, or the percentage of growth, I guess, slowed after that first 5 years, but it continued to grow slowly, and they've remained stable. So sometimes in writing, we go through difficult times. We have valleys, dry spells, writer's block, life interrupts our writing. We experience grief and loss and catastrophe. To grow, we have to actively choose to persevere. So during tough times, I like to read any part of the Bible that Paul wrote, because that guy went through crazy difficulties, and yet he always encourages his readers to stay the course. Don't lose heart. Keep pressing toward the goal. The only way to accomplish the task is to choose active perseverance. And it's a choice. We have to choose to do it. All right. So Hans was a confectioner long before he created the gummy bears. He had this job for many years. He knew what he was doing. He made candy just like all the other candy makers. And then, using the skills he'd learned, he created something unique. He made chewy candy themed around actual dancing bears, which, if you're not familiar, they were huge in Europe's entertainment at that time. So what makes you unique? While I'm talking, I would like you to start making a list of your skills. Write them down or type them, or however you want to put them down. Whether you realize it or not, you have a huge skill set. I can't think of, I think it was actually Jerry Jenkins, but I could be wrong. So if I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. But he said the reason he writes is because he has one skill and he uses it for God. I would hazard the guess that he has more than that skill. But most of us don't recognize all the skills that we have. So if you just kind of start thinking about what skills you have, not just your writing skills. Are you good with people? Can you do origami? Are you a baking ninja? Are you an actual ninja? All right. And if you have come up with at least one skill, do me a favor and put that in the chat, because sometimes it helps to see other people's skills to remind us of our own. So sort of like a little mini brainstorm. And keep brainstorming and making your own list. So you can even, if you see someone else's skill in the chat and you're like, oh, I share that, write it down. You can steal it. It's fine. We likely have skills we haven't even considered using in our writing or marketing or branding. All right. And now write this down, or type if you'd rather. How can I use my existing skills in different ways? I'll say it one more time. How can I use my existing skills in different ways? Sometimes we have to recreate the wheel or the candy or the story. Even if someone else has a similar idea or story, we can put our own spin on it. I will say I did not love the explicit material in this book, and about halfway through, I just skipped the last chapter because I wanted to see what happened to the poor guy. But Barbara Kingsolver's retelling of David Copperfield, it's a genius idea. Charles Dickens was known for bringing cultural issues of his day to light. And so Kingsolver reimagined the David Copperfield story with today's issues. She set it in Appalachia. It is pronounced Appalachia. And then she made painkiller drugs one of the main problems. So she took an existing story and then she made it relevant for a new generation. And she won a Pulitzer for it, I think. So she won a Pulitzer for one of her books. Hans took an existing product, he made a change, and his company made a fortune. So let's talk about ways to apply what makes us unique. All right, so commitment, which involves teamwork, makes the dream work. World War II was kind of a big interruption. Circumstances are often outside our control, and sometimes we can't see the possibility of improvement. You stop and look at your life and you're like, it will never get better. I don't know how I got here and I don't know how to get out of it. If you haven't been there, most of us have been there at least once in our lives. If you haven't, there will be a time. So just know you're normal and it's okay and it will get better. So we have a choice. When we can't see the possibility of improvement, will we give up or will we hang on and work harder? So many of you are familiar with the all is lost step in the hero's journey. In retrospect, that is often the best moment to dig deep and find the creativity that will carry us and our brand and our story to greater success. We need tenacity. We also need to target the right audience. The first consumers were familiar with dancing bears, and so the first bears looked really bearish. They're kind of ugly, actually. As times changed, so did the bear design. The Haribo company changed their tagline to include adults to broaden the consumer base. So think about your consumers. Who needs your idea? Who's going to buy your book? How can you broaden your market? So if you have a children's book, children are not going to buy your book. Or if you have a book about grief, often the people who are buying the book are not necessarily the people who are in grief, but they are the people who have been through grief and then they're trying to help someone else. So think about your individuals who will either gift or refer your book to someone, not just the end user. How can we broaden that market? As we look to broaden our reach, we should consider teaming up with others. We really can't do everything ourselves. When his sons took over, Hans's sons divided the responsibilities based on their talents and skills. So we can work with others who have different strengths or can fill gaps in our knowledge. One of the most amazing book proposals I've ever seen, one of my authors that I help edit for sent it to me and I was just like, oh my gosh, how did you do this? And she said, oh, well, I talked with Edie Melson and, she coached me and we got it done. We don't have all of the skills or all of the knowledge. And so finding the people who have that is really important. And then as team members, we need to give more than we take. So if, in general, you should pay somebody for their services. But if you are friends switching off, your manuscripts or something, make sure that you are giving more or just as much as you take. It's really important to support each other. So we need to find ways to help or promote those individuals who assist us. All right. So Hans teamed up with his wife and his sons, all of whom had varying talents. Don't try to do it yourself. Look for people who can fill those gaps in your knowledge. Let's see. Sorry, I think I have the same thing twice here. Find ways to promote the individuals who help you. So Hans and Haribo, after Hans passed away, Haribo continued the innovative path of discovery that Hans began. They've remained scheduled. I'm so sorry. I don't know what is going on with my words today. They've remained flexible. Don't get attached to your original idea. So be willing to think flexibly. If Hans had insisted on continuing to make hard colorless candy, Haribo probably wouldn't even exist. So consider all your ideas potential stepping stones. You might have some bad ideas. He probably tried a number of different items before he ended up with the gelatin recipe. And I'm pretty sure he didn't expect his gold bears to come to America through German language classrooms and in the pockets of American soldiers. So looking for unique avenues to market our products and ideas is really important. It's very easy to consider marketing a book through a writing conference or a bookstore signing, but those might not be the most effective ways to reach your audience. I am not necessarily saying that you need to be on TikTok if that's where your audience is. That's a personal decision. But there are things to consider. If your book is for teenagers, don't market on Facebook because they aren't there. Find other avenues to find your audience. And if somebody else starts using your idea, it's okay. That means your idea is viable. So it's just time to up our game, make sure we're competitive, and add value. We look at what our competitors offer and then make ours a little better, a little more inviting. Look for ways to frame it differently and really connect with your audience because readers are looking for connection with authors. Hans was an extraordinary individual. Haribo is named in several arenas as the top place to work. And one of the main reasons for that is employees specifically mentioned feeling empowered to share new ideas. I really think Hans would be proud that his values have remained central. And in the same way, we need to ensure our values remain central to our goals and our creative process. Early on, well, actually, not even really early on, but about sometime around last year, when we first became a nonprofit, I was kind of reevaluating some of the things that 540 does. And someone who I think is actually on this call said, well, what did God call you to do originally? And it kind of was like a little bit of a reset. So we do need to make sure those values remain central as we are working through our goals and our creative process. We need to be the same whether we're in public or in private. Be authentic. Never treat anyone as dispensable, because no one is. It's okay to be a little extra. Haribo is known for bright colors and bold fruit flavors. And if you didn't know, their green is actually strawberry flavored, which is interesting because we would expect it to be lime. So they use that. It's a fun and surprising experience when you're eating the Haribo gummies. They do it on purpose. We need to find ways to surprise and delight our audience. So maybe instead of a $5 Amazon gift card, try raffling off a 15-minute conversation or a donation to the winner's charity. Sometimes we use items to try to draw the audience in, but if it's not something that matters to them, then they're not going to connect. So look for ways to make them really excited and want to be involved. And don't be afraid to be yourself. Hans didn't create an entirely new product. It was still candy, but he found a new way to provide a common product, and he focused heavily on his bears. So he could have done all kinds of other items, but instead he just found his uniqueness and he stuck to that. Your uniqueness is what makes your creation special. The first diversification often dilutes what makes your offering unique. So instead of trying to reach the masses, brand to your niche. And here are some ideas to consider as you move forward. First, find a way to brand that means something, even if it only means something to you. Because if you have personal meaning in your brand, it's going to shine through and it's going to attract the people that you are trying to attract. If they can see that meaning and that value. If what you're doing isn't working or isn't bringing you satisfaction, look for ways to use your skills that you have in different ways. All right, so don't reinvent the wheel. Hopefully you're taking notes, but if not, you can watch the replay. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just take something that already exists, maybe even your manuscript, and just make it a little better. Just because someone is already doing something doesn't mean you can't. Put your own twist on it. I don't know if anyone here ate Turkish delight on a regular basis as a child. After we read the Narnia books, I found a Turkish delight recipe and made it and was sorely disappointed, although I hear the real stuff is pretty good. But most of us did not eat Turkish delight. But most of us have had gummy bears, gummy candy, all of that, right? So put your own twist on it and present that. Life circumstances are often outside our control. We might not see any way that things can get better, and that is not the time to give up. So find somebody who can help encourage you. If you don't have somebody, find a writers group like this one, which you've already done. Congratulations. But reach out to somebody in your writers group and say, man, I'm having a tough time. I want to throw my manuscript in the incinerator or my laptop. So, and actually definitely don't want to put your laptop in there because the battery will explode. All right. So consider teaming up with others who can fill those gaps in your knowledge or strength. And remember that your target audience is not your only audience. For a children's book, children are your target audience, but parents, grandparents, and friends, teachers, those are your purchasers. If you create a journal for women, your primary audience, or at least the purchasers, is probably not the women themselves. In general, we don't buy things for ourselves. So your target purchaser is going to be husbands, friends, mothers, people who are going to give those gifts. Don't be afraid to rebrand for a wider audience. So on the flip side of the niche piece, also look for ways that you can reach a wider audience. So Haribo originally was marketing to children, and then at some point they were like, well, hey, adults like this too. And so I can't remember the exact tagline, but basically it's, children and adults love this, or maybe it's just everyone loves gummies. So instead of just targeting to that one little niche, you can look for ways to rebrand to a wider audience. Don't get attached to your original ideas, because some of our original ideas are just stepping stones. On the other hand, do stay niche as much as possible. Don't forget your original recipe for success as you grow. Stay true to who you are. If you are consistent and authentic, that will draw an audience. And this does not mean overshare. Your audience does not need to know about your toe fungus or anything like that. That's not being authentic. Authenticity is being the same person, whether you are in public or private. So if you don't gossip in public, don't gossip in private. If you don't curse at church, maybe you don't curse other places. These are just examples, but try to be the same person no matter where you are. Don't be predictable. Find ways to surprise and delight your audience. So everybody's got giveaways. Try to find really creative ways to do that. A friend of mine actually wrote a book about organization. So she gave away a free virtual organization session. It related directly to her product and created a personal connection with the reader. It was perfect. Look for unique ways to deliver your product or your book. So especially when creating a marketing plan or book proposal, try to look outside the usual. Brainstorm ideas for unique avenues to bring your message. If you have a book for teenagers or for middle grade, look at the schools in your area and the homeschool groups and, anywhere that kids are where they might read, that's one of your avenues. So don't just, go to a marketing conference. I'm sorry, like a writing conference or a book marketing event, because the kids aren't going to be there. If you can get the kids to read your book, they will invite their friends to read the book. Don't be discouraged if your idea doesn't take off or if you don't see immediate growth. Most of the time, we don't see immediate growth. And sometimes what appears to be growth ends up going, several steps back at some point. That's okay. And just stay focused and hold your values and keep going. And at some point, it will pay off. All right. And then just remember that even if other people are using an idea that's similar to yours, you are you. You are unique. So find your uniqueness and make that key in being able to connect with your audience. Engaging with your audience as an author is so important. And it doesn't mean you have to have a Facebook group or things like that, but finding ways to really make people feel that they have been seen and heard when they connect with you is really important. I was watching an interview recently with the main actor from Suits, and he said, I was at this event and this guy came up and he said, I have watched Suits the entire, however many seasons it is, 17 times. That's a super fan right there. That's what you want. You want people to love your book so much that they have read your series. I mean, think about Narnia. If you experienced Narnia as a child, I don't know about you, but my first time reading it, I was 7 years old, and I probably read it through 10 times in the next decade, at least. Because there's just something about it, right? So if you can find your super fans, that is definitely a plus. I don't know if you guys know Jenny Cody, but her kids that read her books, they are super fans. She posts the letters she gets from some of the kids. It's just crazy. And this isn't just about children's books, but I will say that I feel like kids tend to be extremely excited if they get to meet an author. That person becomes real. Kate, I think it's Kate DeMillo. She wrote the book about the mouse with the ears. Shoot. I don't know why it's escaping me, but she's another one. You know, she posts the letters or interactions she has with kids sometimes, and it's amazing. So when you have those interactions, is what I'm getting to, is make sure that they walk away still wowed by who you are. And the way we do that is by being the same person as we are when we wrote the book. Be authentic in that interaction. It's very easy to undo something that your book has created, if we're having a bad day or anything like that. So in your personal branding and that bit of uniqueness, make sure to remember your original values. Actually, years ago, there was a writer that I really liked, and I read a lot of this author's books, and then saw the author in a local conversation with authors, and I wanted to talk to him, and he basically blew me off, and it was a Christian author, and so I had been telling my husband about how this author's books had helped me grow as a Christian, and my husband was standing right there, and after this guy kind of blew me off, my husband was like, well, I'll never read any of his books. So again, maybe he was just having a bad day, and I was like, well, based on his books, I don't think that's really who he is. But we have to be that same person that we are in our books, in person, in private, wherever we are. All right. So unless someone saw this presentation, it is unlikely many people will think, thank goodness for Hans Riegel, as they are chewing on their gummy bears. But now when you have your gummy bears, you can tell people, I know where, at least if it's a Haribo gummy bear, you can tell people where it came from and why the green gummy is a little different than what we would expect, because they are trying to be unique and creative. So as we create, let's focus on what really matters. Our ideas may outlive us and might end up changing the world. So like Hans, let's find creative ways to leave the place a little sweeter. I would like to thank Haribo for allowing me to use the screenshot of Hans Riegel, because they could have said no, and they didn't. But I had a lot of fun putting the gummy bears into other little situations. So that's what I have for today. And I'm happy to answer questions or just chat. Oh, and if you want the resources, there's a bunch of resources. It's kind of a fun read. And that's it. Sorry, I'm trying to stop sharing.
That was great. I really enjoyed it. It definitely takes you outside of the box of how you view marketing. I like that, a new refreshing look on it. A sweeter look, as you say.
A sweeter look at marketing.
I, for one, will never look at gummy bears the same again. Because I know the rest of the story. And that's pretty amazing. Great job, Becky.
Definitely. Tina liked your image with the little bears around the campfire too.
I had so much fun. My husband's like, what are you doing?
One thing that really stuck out to me is when you mentioned diversifying. We hear so often that we should diversify, and you made a really good point that too much diversification dilutes our efforts, and that it's really important to focus on what the core thing, the one thing that we really is most important to us, what we're really trying to do. And I know that I've been guilty in a lot of my endeavors, because part of it is because I'm like, oh, shiny, and I get distracted by these other things that I really enjoy. And then I go, oh, I just wasted 2 hours. And I really have to think about, okay, I've actually started to ask myself, what is my return of investment on this. You hear, you always think about ROI, right? What is ROI? Return of investment. And anytime I get distracted now, if I catch it early enough, I ask myself, is this a good return of investment for the time I'm about to spend or I am spending? And then if not, I try to shift myself. And it goes back to that focus. Diversify, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of interesting, yet being unique in what we do, I think that's where the diversity comes in, but not doing so many things. And that's a very good distinction. I'm really glad you made that.
Someone in the chat mentioned that many authors, even celebrities, are naturally introverted, and some are autistic and would would rather just not go out and network and have fame. And that's a really good point. It is very difficult to be the person you are in the book if that's not a talent. And so that's another great place to team up. So one of the things that I've had the joy of running when we go to Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference, I have an introvert friendly networking session, and basically you don't have to talk. It's a lot of fun, actually. So if you can find yourself, if you are an introvert or on the spectrum, find yourself an extrovert who loves you and loves to talk and is willing to hang out with you. It goes both ways, because I am, as you know, a serial extrovert, and I surround myself with introverts, and actually have several friends on the spectrum as well, because those people keep me grounded. Like, when you talk about that, oh shiny, or hey, you said you were going to do this thing like 3 days ago and I still haven't seen it, so are you still planning to do it? We need each other. So I would highly recommend, if you can find somebody who's willing to go with you to that book signing and kind of be sort of your publicist, that would be a really fun team up. And I guarantee you, if you find the right extrovert, they're going to love doing it with you. So that would be my suggestion.
I'm with Catherine. She mentioned, sign me up for that introverted friendly networking. I'm all for that business.
Come to Blue Ridge.
It was a lot of fun. I did attend Becky's introvert session, even though I'm not an introvert. So it was fun getting to kind of rub elbows with people that were like, here, sign my paper, and walk away. So because we just exchanged contact information. But it was fun. I did strike up a few conversations with some shy people, and it was neat. We had a good gathering. So great idea, Becky. I think it was successful.
If everybody would like to come back on and add to the discussion or ask questions directly, please do. I know I did take a few people off screen, so I will go ahead and release some people from Writers Chat jail.
And Tina's got a couple of really great comments in here. I feel like God leads me through seasons of diversifying to gain wider experience and skills and insights before focusing in on the more specific path. That's very true.
I know you've given me a lot to think of. This is kind of a struggle area this year, because I'm fairly newly published, and so trying to figure out the whole marketing thing can be like eating the proverbial elephant, only you're not quite sure how to even get those individual bites out.
Yes. Maybe I'm just going to take a lick.
Can I venture that far? Maybe. Let's try it.
Hopefully it's a chocolate elephant.
Yes, I would prefer it that way. Yeah. Anybody else? Any questions or comments? Random thoughts?
Looks like we're having an extrovert unite in the chat.
So funny.
I appreciate the token extroverts.
I will say, at a writers conference, it's like 90% introvert, 10% extrovert, if that, which is interesting. It's because all the smart people keep their mouths shut and pay attention, and then they can write the things.
Becky, this has been great. What advice would you give, say, to an up and coming, an aspiring author who is here or watches the replay later, and they're not quite sure where to even start with branding?
Mhm.
What would you say to them?
I think the first thing would be to figure out who you are as a person and as a writer. When I went to a conference back in, I think it was 2016, that was really where a lot of things began for me, because that's what they said. They said, you got to go home and figure out who you are before, not just to me, it was to the whole crowd, although I felt like it was to me. You need to go home, figure out who you are and what your message is, and then write it down somewhere where you can never forget it, and then keep that kind of at the forefront and pay attention to it, because we all, some of us kind of feel sometimes that we are not special, or we're not as unique as someone else, or um, it's easy to compare, particularly on social media. You see, people who look like they've got it all together, and they're doing the thing that you wanted to do, and they're winning all the awards and all of this. um, it's easy to compare and feel like we're not quite making it. And if you are one of those people, that's okay too. Like, don't hesitate to win the awards, because we like to cheer you on. But my point is, for those who are not there yet, it can be really overwhelming. And so the same advice that I give teenagers who are on social media, it's like, those are the best moments of their day that they're posting. They are not posting. Most people are not posting about the terrible um, feelings of being an imposter, or the writer's block, or the difficulties, or you know how do I start writing again after I've lost this person. Like, after my sister died, it took me 6 months to write anything, because my brain just couldn't, it wouldn't. And recently, someone who had also lost someone mentioned the same thing. So like, we have these difficult times in our lives when we might not be able to do some of those things, and to beat ourselves up over it and try to force ourselves to write. About 3 months in, I was trying, and it was just not going well. And finally I said, you know what, I'm just going to give my brain a break and see what happens. And like I said, it took about 6 months before I could almost feel the fog lift, and it was like, oh, I can think again. This is great. um so I guess that would be, I don't know if that was really actionable advice, but figure out who you are, stick to that, and don't compare yourself to other people would be the main advice. And that's difficult. It is quite difficult. And sometimes, if you're not sure, ask people who know you, because there are times when we can't see ourselves for who we are. Um, there's a picture, if you guys have been to Ridgecrest, there's a picture of me when I had brown hair up on the wall. They took it in 2019, and then they messaged me and asked if they could use my picture, and I thought it was going to be like a 1 inch by 1 inch on the back of their brochure. And then the next time I visited Ridgecrest, I came around the corner and saw a 4 foot picture of my face on the wall. When I saw that picture, all I saw were the flaws. It's like, my eyes are too squinty, my cheeks are too round. Like, literally every little thing about that picture, I did not like it. And as I was looking at it, I had taken a picture of it, and like, I was back at our house and it was on my computer. I was just like kind of staring at it like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is on the wall there. And my husband looked over my shoulder, and he had no idea what I was thinking. And he started picking apart the picture. I love the way your eyes disappear when you smile. I think it's so cute. Like, I love your cheeks. They're so adorable. I just want to, like, he went through every single thing that had been in. It was like he had my list. It was crazy. And then after he walked away, that's what I saw, was what he was seeing. And so sometimes we need somebody else's perspective. And so if you are like, man, I can't see what's unique about me, ask somebody who knows you and who cares about you. Do not ask like the jerk down the block who hates your guts because they're going to tell you how unique you are in the ways you don't want to know. But like talk to somebody who loves you and who understands you. And sometimes that's difficult too. I had a conversation this year with another writer who was like, I feel like no one understands me except other writers, but no one in my family understands me, and they can't, see that I have skills here because they don't really care about this particular thing. And my response, because I've seen that, not, I mean, like I will say my husband and my daughter are like super supportive, and my daughter in particular is like incredibly excited to tell people my mom writes. But if I want them to read what I've written, like I have to put it in front of them. Like they're not searching it out. And it's not because they don't care. It's just they have other things going on. And so my writer friend, the way I kind of described it to her was, I have a really good friend who loves math with a passion. Like they want to tell me about how this equation does this thing, and they can explain the universe in numbers and symbols, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't mean to be mean, but like, I am not a mather. I am a writer, and I love you, but I'm not interested in your math, right? So there are people who love us dearly and just aren't interested in writing, and that is also okay. And those people are some of our biggest supporters, and we have to recognize it for what it is and not expect them to only support us in the ways that we want to be supported, if that makes sense. So I kind of went off on a tangent, but hopefully that's helpful to somebody.
I think it's a
I
good
like sorry, Melissa. I like what Tina said in the chat, that we also need to remember how our Heavenly Father sees us, because that's important too. He's the one that's given us the personality we have. He's the one that's given us what we need to answer his call to write for his glory. So I love that, Tina. Thank you for that reminder. I have another question. How would you, a lot of people, when they think of brand, they think of color and pictures and all of that. So how do you tie in figuring out your colors and all of that with who you are?
Google what colors mean. It might not be that exact question, but there are some great tools on the internet explaining what colors mean in branding, and they're fantastic. There is a reason that UPS is brown. There is a reason that Home Depot is orange. There's a reason that Lowe's is blue. There's a reason that politicians wear red and blue ties most of the time. So if you look into what colors mean, orange, for instance, is about like being energetic and having, I'm not saying like woo woo energy, but having energy that kind of exudes from you. Blues are usually, more solid and dependable type. When you see that color, it's like, oh, I can depend on these people. Red is for power. So there are meanings that our brains recognize even before we know what they're about. Like if I say yellow, you think what emotion?
bright, cheery.
Right. Happy, right? Sunshiny. So we
Energy.
automatically, yeah. Unless you hate yellow, then maybe you don't think of those things. But in general, we all recognize certain colors mean certain things. And so when you research into what all the colors mean, that can help you pick the right color for you.
That also kind of makes me think about, what our favorite colors are, and if we are attracted to those certain colors because partly of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because even with the 540 main color is this sort of tealy blue color, and green is growth and blue is dependability. So it's, that community is geared toward supporting each other and growing. So that's why we picked that color.
Well, go ahead, Norma.
I just said, do we have any more questions? I see you've sparked some conversation in the chat about different colors and some of their meanings, and even how the shade of said colors matter.
Mm.
So this has been, you've sparked a lot of intrigue and interest in just a few simple things, Becky, and we appreciate that so much. Melissa, I'll toss it back to you.
All right. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I definitely do want to pause to thank you, Becky, for this. It's been great, and we're always enjoy having you on the show and your fun perspective on things. I really like the out of the box way you present overall. It's just, it appeals to me anyway.
I have a niche audience.
So next week, I guess I should address that too for those who are watching the replay. Next week, we are going to be talking about how to create an accountability group, and Kim Miller is going to be our guest to talk about that. She's also going to be bringing a few friends on board to help add to the discussion. We'll have a fun Q&A about that, and looking forward to it. For those who are watching the replay, you can catch us every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 12:15. Thanks for joining us on Writers Chat, and we will see you next time. For those here, please stay with us for the after party, and we'll catch you then.
Thank you so much for having me. This is always so much fun to be with you guys.
Yes, thank you again. Bye, everyone.